Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Cutting Room in New York City. I'm Brad Talinsky with BackStory Events, and tonight's program is going to be live streamed on guitarworld.com. Upcoming BackStory conversations include an evening with John Anderson of Yes, the Zombies, who have just been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and the new Allman Betts Band, which are the sons of legendary Allman Brothers band, Greg Allman and Dickie Betts. But here tonight, on our stage this evening, we have one of the great voices and songwriters of the rock era. And he's here tonight to talk about his new, very powerful record called Dreamers. And then play a little bit of the music afterwards, which will be great. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to bring out Mr. Jesse Colin Young. How are you doing this evening?
Good.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming out.
So after several years of sort of laying back from the music business, you were inspired to get re-involved. I understand after seeing a concert with your son playing. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, Tristan was graduating from Berkeley, College of Music in Boston, and Connie and I, my wife, we went to see his senior recital, and he'd put together a band to play some fusion, and I hadn't been playing in years. And I went and listened to them, and the light that had gone off came back on, and I said, I want to play with some young people like this, because they're amazing, and they're strong, and they're so good. So T helped me to put a band together of his friends, and all of them from Berkeley, and we started rehearsing. And I think after we'd played 4 or 5 gigs, I realized that that we needed to record, that so much chemistry was happening on stage that I wanted it on a record. So we planned.
Well, when you were watching the concert, when you were seeing him play, do you remember what it was in particular that moved you about it?
Mm-mm. No, in the recitals at Berkeley, people come in between classes. You know, it's a pretty empty room, and your friends come, but then they got to go to class. And so I was about 20 feet in front, right about there, and I had that whole thing to myself. And the music was loud, but not too loud, and it just went into my body and spoke to me and said, "Wake up, Jess, you're not done yet."
Well, what was your headspace before that? I mean, were you sort of at all cynical about the music business, or sort of uninspired?
No, I had Lyme disease, and I was wrestling with that. Diagnosed in 2009. So it took till 2016, when T was graduating, that I was feeling stronger.
And you heard the call again.
I heard the call, yes, and then when I found out we were going to, the way things were turning politically, I thought, okay, maybe I need to be out there singing Get Together again.
Well, as you all can see, this great album cover, the album is called Dreamers, and a lot of the songs seem to be pretty much ripped out of the headlines of CNN. So not only was your son inspired, but it seemed like the current political environment also inspired you to get creative and involved again.
Well, it really started, Connie and I wrote a song together in the spring.
Connie,
My wife,
your
yeah.
wife Connie, yeah.
And someone, a fan who was a part of the movie that became Boston Strong said, got a hold of us on Facebook and said, you know, we have a song and it really stinks. So would you think about writing a song? And Connie and I said, yeah. Our son and all his friends were 3 blocks from the finish line of the marathon. And there was one, and once they shut the cell towers down, we couldn't reach him. All we'd heard on NPR was there's an explosion, and then, yeah, so there were some tense moments there, and next morning I woke up and there was a sheet of lyrics from Connie to go with my coffee, and 2 days later we had a song, and I thought, wow, this was so easy and so fast.
Fun.
I'd had a long dry spell before that, probably due to Lyme's and not much writing. Mm-hmm. So we were always, I think I was already, when you start writing again, then you think, geez, I need a band. I need a studio. I will need these things. And so my mind, I guess, was rolling before I got there. Obviously, I read the New York Times. Doesn't seem like fake news to me, and I was born and raised here in New York, and maybe that's why. But yeah, there was a lot to be upset about. I didn't really want to see my country deconstructed, and a lot of that's in the record.
Well, the title of the album is Dreamers, and there's a great song called They Are Dreamers. Could you tell me a little bit about what that song is about and what inspired it for you?
Yes, it's about the 800,000 dreamers that we need to keep here in the country. Don't turn your back on the dreamers. Dreams made our country strong. And it's true. We are a country of immigrants. All my people, from the little squirt that was born on the Mayflower to the Scots and Irish from my mother's side that came in the middle of the 19th century, they were all dreamers. And building those dreams here is our strength. So I wanted to say that. I knew that lots of people wanted to say that. Don't turn your back on the dreamers. Those are people.
You do evoke sort of your, your parents coming here, and you started out sort of as a folk musician, and I was wondering whether that we hear bits of Celtic music and Irish music influences, throughout your career, really. I mean, whether it was in the beginning of Darkness, or Cast a Stone on the new record. How much was that a part of your growing up? Did you play Irish folk music? Was that around your home?
No, I think it's just in my blood. I sang camp songs, but I grew up singing. I don't think we had a television till I was 10, and so we sang a lot. My father played the piano. My mother had a gorgeous voice, and my sister and I sang in the car and sang in the living and sang at Christmas, and then sang just for fun. So there was a lot of singing going on.
What kind of songs were you singing?
All kind of funny songs that they sang in camps, and of course, Harvard fight songs. At one point, my father was the first man in his family to go to college, and it happened to be Harvard. He's a smart. And so he taught me all the songs about kicking Yale's ass. So I think I made my debut somewhere here in the city, maybe at the Harvard Club, when I was 8 years old. My father was having a reunion. Life begins at 50 for the class of 25. And they put me on a cocktail table, like a round one, and there was an accordion player there who knew all the, that's how I made his living. And I gave forth with about 6 of my favorite Harvard fight songs, and everybody thought that was so cute. They taught him those. Yeah.
So on the
So
record,
no Celtic music till I started to dig in to folk music, and then I was maybe a freshman in college when Folkways Records started to put out these compilations, some of them from the Library of Congress, some of them from I don't know where, and all of a sudden we were exposed to all this Appalachian music, but not pop music, Appalachian music recorded in the field, and also the blues, and those two beautiful strains that are, well, of course the Celtic music is brought by those from Scotland and Ireland and Wales, but some of the music, we grew it here, and I've loved all of it.
well, getting back to your point, that's what makes our country great is this incredible melting pot, and we don't want that to stop, because it's delivered so much amazing music, hasn't it? Yeah. All of it. Now on the record there is pretty dark song called Shapeshifters. I think you're going to actually play it later on, and sort of the idea behind it is, I felt anyways, was that the most dangerous thing are people that twist the truth for us. Can you tell us a little bit about what inspired that song and how that came about?
Well, as you can imagine, I don't watch a lot of Fox News. But occasionally, but that's not the only place. That we're losing sight of the truth, and it's harder and harder to find the truth. And I think for people who don't have a lot of ability and access to good writers and people who are trying to tell the truth and bring us the facts, not the alternate facts. There are no alternate facts. Come on. So, yeah, that's, the song ends, if lies can win, we're bound to lose. And that's it. If we cannot hold on to the truth, if we cannot keep our press free and strong, then we're done for as a free nation. So this is real important to me, that we keep on that path.
We, to some degree, your career almost started back on a political note with one of your most well-known songs, is "Get Together," which has been used for years and years and years now for peaceful protest, and to inspire people to sort of get out there and do the right thing, right, which is to love one another. Could you tell us a little bit? I'm not sure I know what the origins of that song was.
A writer named Dino Valenti was kind of he wrote "Get Together," and he was a kind of a cult star in the folk scene in Greenwich Village, probably when I was at NYU, because by the time I had quit school and spent a couple years playing solo, Dino was gone. But he left Get Together in the village. I mean, Richie knew it, and I walked into an open mic at the Cafe Go-Go when the Young Bloods were playing there as the opening act to whomever, and a fellow named Buzzy Lenhart Buzzy was on stage. David's from Cleveland, and Buzzy was from Cleveland, and he was singing Get Together, and I just ran backstage and asked him to write the lyrics out for me, because I said, I'm in love. That's beautiful. And I took it into rehearsal with the Youngbloods the next day. And I knew, it was like a door, when the clouds part and the angels come down. Get Together was an angel to me, and I knew that it would be part of my life, and an important part and almost like a guiding star for the rest of my life.
Creating such an iconic song, has it been a blessing and a curse, or have you always felt that, positive things about that song?
I've always loved it. My favorite part of the show is when we get together and the people sing. And so it's been a blessing from the beginning. I can't imagine it ever not being. And the amazing part is I was in a Greenwich Village show here that we did in the park this summer, was it? Yeah, and pretty young audience. There were all kinds of people playing, and they were not my fans. It was free. And they sang Get Together with more feeling and more, some of them were going like this, singing Get Together. And I thought that was a little far out. But, and then I realized that it was the 1-year anniversary of Charlottesville, and they were saying, no, yes, this is peace. And so that was quite an experience. I've sung it for a lot of people. There's a real hunger for that song and for what it means and for that. And the more ugliness is in our discourse, actually has, I think, made the hunger stronger, because I'd never heard it sung quite like that in my life. And that was this summer. So the power of the song is, I've always thought that if I had written it, I would think I was somewhere near the right hand of God, and that I was glad that I had just discovered it in someone else, so that I could love it and talk about it unashamedly, how beautiful it is and how strong.
Well, that is part of the folk tradition. We sort of lose that, but sort of the cool thing about folk music was initially the idea of sharing great songs with other people. Now we get sort of caught up in this idea that everybody has to create their own music, mm-hmm. and you've done that and done that well, but there's no shame in finding a beautiful song and singing it and passing it along to other people.
No, I remember I started singing when John Lennon was killed. I started singing Imagine in my set, and that lasted probably 10 years and really helped me to get past my grief.
And you do a great job with some of Marvin Gaye's stuff too.
I made a record. I never put it out. But I put What's Going On in the holes of the verse in Imagine. So I actually have a recording of Imagine with another me singing What's Going On in between. Works great. It's beautiful. And the chorus, of course, is the Imagine chorus.
I heard this story. I thought it was interesting. Get Together caused a little bit of a snafu, though, on a Johnny Carson show. Could you tell us a little bit about that, that story?
So Carson had called us, not Carson, but his guys, the producers, and wanted the Youngbloods. I don't know whether it was kind of on short notice. Maybe somebody canceled on them. Or we were in California, and Stuart, our manager, spoke to them, and he said, well, you know, we're promoting Elephant Mountain, so we would like to sing a song from Elephant Mountain, and then, of course, we'll sing Get Together. And they said, okay. And then when push came to shove, it was like, play your hit and get off. I'm not put that way, but that's the way it came across. We were only going to be allowed to play Get Together, and we said, and walked out of there. And there was a lot of that needed in those times. I mean, we've been in lawsuits trying to get paid for, you know, maybe we were in one of the earlier ones that helped all musicians get to share the money, the considerable money that comes from movies. And it used to, you know, maybe they get 50 grand for Get Together, put it in a movie. None of that used to go to the artists. Now it's different. And we helped to make that happen by saying, no, you can't have it all.
In the 70s, you were also involved with the No Nuke show, Musicians United for Safe Energy. It was an incredible show that included yourself and people like Jackson Browne and Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. Very political, outspoken about using safe energy. Does it bother you that we're still talking about the same issues that we were, you know, in some ways that we were struggling with 30 years ago?
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure we all wish we could grow faster, but that was a great joy. I had 2 young children. I was one of the founders of No Nukes. And I was sitting in bed watching public television, and on came some renegade scientists from the nuclear industry and started talking about plutonium and how the half-life was 20,000 years. And so that means it would become inert in 200,000 years. And I looked at my kids, they were little, Julie and Cheyenne. I said, don't these guys have any kids? I mean, to release, and what are they doing? They're boiling water. That's what a lot of the nuclear plants are. They call them tea kettle plants. I just couldn't believe it, so I called a friend, Tom Campbell, who's a marvelous promoter, and I said, we have to do something about this. We can't let them build these. And of course, they had already built a bunch of them. But that was marvelous. All we did with the music was to support, and Madison Square Garden, I think we made some money. I hope so. Because there were 5 days. Bruce did a day, and Doobie Brothers, and CSN, and Jackson, and James Taylor came to that show. There were maybe hundreds of local anti-nuclear groups around the country dealing with nukes being built in their neighborhoods. And so we funded them. You know, they would, after we made that money, and there were shows coming up to that, but nothing that size. They would apply for grants, and get a grant to do some work. It was a beautiful time. The power, the people's power. 250,000 people came to Battery Park that Sunday to hear us play, and I'll never forget it.
And the record, the music's still out there, and the movie's still out there,
Yeah.
and it's still very inspirational. When I was getting ready to do this interview, I checked it out, and fantastic evening of music. Yeah, and it made difference too. It did bring attention to the problem.
Well, between that and 3 Mile Island, there was not one nuke built in this country for the next 30 years.
Shows you, man. Shows you. Speaking out sometimes can help solve a problem. Yeah. One of the more unusual, one of the more interesting songs on this beautiful album, Dreamers, which I want to get back to, is something called Lime Life. And I think it's the first song I can think of that somebody's actually written about Lyme's disease. And it's a little funny when you say it, but it's such a serious problem. And I've known people that, I mean, myself in my life, that have gone for months without it being able to be diagnosed. And I know that you had a similar issue. Could you talk a little bit about that song and how it's affected your life?
Well, we moved from Youngbloods from Lower East Side in '67 to, of course, San Francisco. Well, outside of San Francisco in the country. And I started getting in the woods every other day. And I may have had it 30 years before I was diagnosed, or even longer. It kind of goes dormant sometimes if your immune system is strong. But then Connie and I were living in my old house in Inverness, and it burned down in a forest fire. And that took me, we had a little place in Hawaii, we moved there. Excuse me. But that loss kind of crushed me. I mean, that's the place where I recorded Ridgetop and Songbird and all these albums. So when I was weak like that and down and mourning, Lyme disease popped up. Nobody knew what it was. That was still, well, nobody in Hawaii anyway would identify it or tested me for it, even though I had fairly common symptoms of increased anxiety, panic attacks, a lot of joint pain. It makes you crazy eventually. And so I started to get better, and I thought to myself, one time someone was bugging me for an interview, and I'm not really crazy about interviews. So, and I was saying no for a couple of years, and then I thought, why don't you talk about Lyme disease? I mean, I know there are hundreds of thousands of people undiagnosed in our country alone. I may have been undiagnosed for 35 years. But by that time, the Lyme has made a home in you, and so far, there is no cure. But antibiotics kind of can keep it at bay. So I wanted, as I started to get better, and then all these people started writing me on Facebook when I did the interview about Lyme disease and their experiences, and I wanted to leave a picture of what it's like, so that people, especially people who don't know much about it, would be struck by, wow, that's really tough, and maybe someday we'll spend some money on finding a cure. Be great. But so I wrote Lyme Life to just It's been hard just to get Lyme disease now is kind of commonly known, and I know I meet a lot of people who say, geez, my cousin, gosh, my best friend. But at the time I wrote it, it was pretty quiet, and I wanted to just increase people's awareness of it, so that those people who were writing me that told me they checked into a mental institution, and I said, did you get tested for Lyme's? And they got tested and treated and checked out of the mental institution. And mental institutions are full of people with chronic Lyme.
So I hope everybody's getting a sense. This record, Dreamers, it's a record with a mission. There's a lot of things on Jesse's mind here. I just want to take just a little bit step back to, I mean, you grew up in, and your career got started in the Greenwich Village area, and this is really one of the sort of most fertile, legendary places in the history of American music. Can you tell us like a little bit of what it was like to, in your early days, being a performer, playing in that environment?
Yeah, it was horrible. But it got better fast. I was in NYU. NYU's right on the park. And I would see these scruffy-looking people hanging around the fountain and playing music. I'm thinking, I wonder if I should quit school and join them. So I did. And the first way in was the basket houses. And those were the first places probably in America to charge $10 for a cup of coffee, because none of them had a liquor license, but this is the way they get people in, and we would play for free and then pass a basket. So after being charged $10 for a cup of coffee, I mean, people were reticent to throw 20s into the
Now we're back to getting
baskets, yeah.
coffee for $10. That's the. But was it competitive or was it encouraging? Like you know, there were a lot of musicians trying to jockey for gigs and stuff like that. How do you remember that?
Yeah, there's a lot of holes in my memory. Lyme disease does that to you, and it's kind of like Swiss cheese. But I don't remember the transition from. I know I was in a building where we had a rent strike for almost a year. I was paying no rent, so I could, if I made $5 in the village, you know, that's like 4 Sabre hot dogs. You know, you can live. So, and I don't remember the transition. I guess eventually I had to get a job, and through my sister had a CBS newsman for a husband, and he sent me to the fella named Walter Bishop, who did the music, you know, the canned music for the news. And Walter sent me to a man named Bobby Scott. He said, I played for Walter, and he said, I know who would love you. And he sent me to Bobby Scott, who was working for Bobby Darin at the time. And Jim McGuinn was playing 12-string with Bobby Darin in the folk part of his act. And so that was the beginning of, Darin never got around to listening to me live. So Bobby one day just took me in the studio and he said, sit over here, kid, and play everything you know. And 4 hours later, I had my first record, Soul of a City Boy. So God bless him. Bobby was he was a wonderful mentor and a genius musician. And I miss him, but everybody needs a mentor like that. Somebody who appreciates who you are, what you do, no matter what it is, and opens the door for you. He just said to me, he was a jazz musician, really, and he said, if you have an album, you can work. You don't have an album, you can't work. So, I mean, he was probably thinking of New York, but, I mean, as soon as that album came out, I was able to play the Club 47, and that was the beginning in Boston, in Cambridge, and that was the beginning. And I don't, I don't remember competitiveness. There was a lot of joy in sharing music, and getting to play and listen to guys like Richie Havens, who was been in the Village for so long, and such a marvelous. Anne McGuinn was there, doing Beatle impressions. This was before he, in love with. This is the beginning of all the folk singers saying, thanks to the Beatles, we got to have a band, and that gave us the Lovin' Spoonful, the Byrds, Buffalo Springfield, Youngbloods, and a bunch of others. It's a great time.
Well, eventually you left New York for the West Coast, traitor, and and made really some of the really most beautiful records, really romantic records in the 70s. I wonder, do you have any statistics on how many children were conceived listening to your record?
No, I always...
BMJ, I want you guys to get on that, right? It's a whole marketing thing. I was saying, no wonder Jesse cares about all the, all today's issues and the kids, and because he was probably directly responsible for having most of them being made there.
I know that Joe Smith, who was the head of Warner's at that time, he loved Misty Roses. And he said it was an absolute romantic bullseye if he was dating a young lady. If he put on Misty Roses, it got romantic fast. So he gave me enough money to buy a $20,000 tape machine. He was a good man. That was a great label.
So to move us back into the present, one sort of interesting thing that you're doing in addition to all this great music that you're making these days is you've got you grow coffee, you make coffee. What is that? Has that taught you anything about the world or about life? Have you learned anything new while, getting back to the garden, so to speak?
Yeah. Well, I'm from Queens, I mean, you know what trees look like in Queens. They're little skinny things with a big cage around them, and they only get about this big. And so my wife's a farmer. It was her crazy idea to plant coffee. We had macadamia nuts tree. We bought this farm when it was a wild place, and we closed on it the week before we were married in Hawaii. And so we spent our honeymoon there. It's always been and we ended up raising our children there when we got burned out of Point Reyes in '95 when the house burned down. So I learned to be a farmer. I don't know how good of a farmer I am, but it was an adventure for me, and still is. We still have the farm. We have a very small crop. We only have 4 acres, and we sell it just on the internet on my website. And last year we just kind of, I guess it was probably because we were touring, it just sold out. So, but even 4 acres, I don't know. I mean, it's given me great respect for farmers. 4 acres is probably 300 trees. It's a lot of work. And we're organic farmers, and that's even more work. But yeah, we want to do what's right. I saw it used to be that coffee was not a poison crop. It was just, they used a lot of Roundup to kill the weeds. And one day when we had just moved there and we'd planted some food, we watched the guys spraying Roundup on our crop. And the wind and the Roundup was coming over into the corn patch. And that's the day we became organic farmers. I mean, we just said, that's crazy. We don't want to eat that. So more work, but a lot of joy. And we grow some of the best coffee in the world.
And Jesse's been kind enough to bring a bunch of coffee with him. And when you leave, there's a table out and back, and everybody should grab some. I mean, I smelled some. It smelled delicious. I haven't had any yet. It smelled good. I'm a big coffee drinker, so I'm into it.
Oh, you love it.
And so Jesse, now you've written all these fantastic songs, and you've got this new record, Dreamers, that's out there. What are your plans?
Almost out there.
Almost out there.
Friday, yeah.
Friday. Okay. Yes. I've heard it. It's great. So what are the future plans? Are you going to tour?
Perhaps sometimes later in the spring, I think. We're going to take it easy and pick some special things, special shows to do, and spend some time promoting the record, because it's a beauty. And I mean, there's so much music. It's really hard to get your head above water and get heard. So I wrote this record because this is the way I contribute to my world. And I want it, but if nobody hears it, then I don't get to contribute. So I really, I'll spend some time trying to lift it up where it can be seen and listened to, and maybe it will help. I hope so, because we need a lot of help right now.
So we're going to take a little break, and Jesse's going to come back and play some songs off the new record. This is going to be exciting. It's a real treat. So hang in there for a little bit, and we'll talk to you soon.
We'll be right back.